As a die-hard Bloodborne fan who's been absolutely starved for more, Lies of P scratches an itch for my girlfriend, which she can only describe as eye-opening. Having the insight of playing every Souls title under the sun and still looking for more, it seemed only fair that I cut her strings loose and see how long her nose can grow.
Man, I am one pissed off puppet.
Unfortunately, we weren't in a position to purchase 2 copies of the game this time around, and knowing how special Bloodborne is to her, I relented and let her take the lead on Puppet Souls. I played my own file here and there, but she was having a lot of fun being the leading expert on this game for the both of us. So no strings attached, we're setting her loose to send all these other would-be real boys back to the factory. Because this time, I made my girlfriend into a puppet.
Dark Souls door open!
Lies of P knows that it's Souls-like and embraces that identity. The core Dark Souls formula is at work here with things like bonfires, flasks, and shortcuts interconnecting its world. But after pulling some strings, they added a fresh twist on the old formula.
Yeah!
To me, the thing I found most fascinating was how well Souls translates to puppets. For weeks now, the two of us have jokingly referred to the game as Puppet Souls. The way enemies approach and flail their weapons about is not only uncanny, but feels so familiar to Hollows.
Puppet Souls.
I never in a million years would have thought that Dark Souls meets Pinocchio would work so well, but I really felt like we were back in Yarnum the first hours of this game. The creepy and weird ways the puppets contort, pull themselves apart, only adds to the already brilliant aesthetic.
God damn it. Oh my god, when I die, I just drop. Lie or die? Oh my god, is my nose gonna grow?
The game earns credit for being unsettling enough that many times my girlfriend would end up putting the controller down and calling it an evening just from the nerves alone. Usually it's a tough boss that gets her to throw in the towel, but I guess the constant whirring and cracking of animatronics got in her head.
Oh god, this is so creepy.
Whether it was the bizarre wind-up of the butler puppets, or the way the opera dolls have tufts of hair missing all over their heads, the horror lies somewhere in the uncanniness of it all.
That was creepy as fuck.
And this is saying something, because my girlfriend loves dolls. In fact, she has a collection of them, but she can't bring them into the house because their glassy eyes scare me half to death. I take some small reprieve in the idea that this game may have finally brought us one step closer to getting rid of that awful box of porcelain nightmares we've been keeping in the garage since we moved in together. Either way, back to Puppet Souls.
What? That didn't just drop down? You're kidding me!
It's safe to say that approaching Lies of P as another Souls game was a mistake on her part, and refusing to adapt to the new things it brings to the table would leave any Souls player frustrated. The reality is this isn't Dark Souls or Bloodborne, or that one I don't know how to pronounce. It takes pieces from each and assembles them into something unique.
Okay, turn. You're allowed to dodge, you don't just have to block. How is it? Once I learn how to block, I forget that I can dodge.
The biggest problem she faced was trying too hard to treat it like one of the aforementioned titles. She ran into the roadblock of only wearing one cap at a time. Whether she had her Bloodborne cap on and was treating everything like a hunt, or her Sekiro sword equipped and playing like she had infinite stamina. Whatever it was, she'd always get slammed by the things that it wasn't.
No! I dodged, damn it.
From what I've come to understand, the best way to enjoy this game seems to be to celebrate the healthy blend of all that inspires it. I mean, you've got that lonely, hollow feeling that the Souls games relish in, and with a shinobi prosthetic to boot, all while dressed like a pirate.
Kramer, how am I gonna wear this? I can't wear this!
Hey, this looks better than anything you own.
It's like all the titles got thrown in a blender, and this is what came out.
What the That's an exploding dog! Oh my god, dogs have chainsaws? I'm like, isn't just being a dog in these games bad enough?
As we've both come to learn, a lot of the time fishing for parries on every single hit does more harm than good, especially on a first playthrough. Blocking is your friend and is actually a lot more forgiving than you'd think. As a Souls user that wrote off shields long ago, it felt a little unnatural for her.
Oh, I got it. Yeah!
There you go. Nice, well done. But once she made the switch, her experience with enemies improved substantially. Not only was she taking less damage, but the game also allows you to get health back with its guard regain.
Nice! Kill him. Yeah! What a way to take him out. Eee!
Bloodborne's rally mechanic is borrowed here with some slight adjustment to fit Lies of P's combat. When health is lost through guarding, a dim red portion of her health bar will refill as she deals damage to the enemies. Sound familiar? Keeping her guard up and occasionally sneaking in perfect guards as she learned enemies' attacks was a lot less frustrating than trying to parry every single hit.
Nice. Yeah!
Couple this with the rally mechanic, and you have a fairly fun gameplay loop of blocking and perfect guarding to raise an enemy's stagger, while keeping aggression up to allow your health to tick back up. If that isn't enough, landing perfect guards and dealing damage also recharges her pulse cells, which is this game's iteration of the Estus Flask.
Oh wait, he's saying like, are you a dream or a nightmare? So he realizes that I keep coming back. Well, that's never happened to me before.
Not only does the recharge provide her a glimmer of hope in otherwise bleak situations where she's out of heals, but it makes it feel like she's always building towards something by staying engaged in the fight. You're either recharging your heals, building up the boss's stagger, working towards the enemy breaking its weapon, or charging your own Fable slots, all the while striking a nice balance between chipping down foes' health while restoring your own through guard regain. This life regen mechanic has some strings attached to it, ironically. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, as bosses have it as well. Unlike yours, which drains if out of combat, the bosses will refill if you give them the breathing room to do so. Keeping up your aggression during a fight becomes that much more crucial because every second you aren't hitting the boss is more health you'll have to chip away. She managed to make it through the first couple of bosses with her usual soul strategies, but they felt a lot spongier than they should have. This all came to a head when she finally made it to the scrapped Watchman, though. According to her, the duration she was fighting this boss was so absurd that she'd sometimes have to sharpen her weapon 3 or 4 times mid-fight. Kudos to her for finding windows to use the grinder, but wailing on him that long without realizing something was up is a certified girlfriend maneuver if I've ever seen one.
I dodged! Are you kidding me? Oh my god. Ugh.
This is a bit of an unfortunate side effect of having her play a new game with me in tandem, as I'm just as lost as she is and don't have much to offer by way of advice. Usually when I make her play something, with a few exceptions, it's a game I already have a lot of experience with. She's learned to rely on me to offer guidance or encouragement when she gets stuck, but here I was just as out of the loop. That being said, after getting a chance to play a bit for myself, and even taking a swing at that boss on my own file, I realized what her problem was. She wasn't getting enough visceral attacks. Fatal attacks are the visceral attacks of Lies of P, and they function very similar to death blows from Sekiro. The major catch to them is that they not only deal hefty damage, but remove the boss's regen bar. It wasn't until I sat down and played for myself that I realized the fight was less about lowering the boss's health bar and more about building their stagger. Her approach of sidestepping every attack and sneaking in punishes where she knew she was safe was textbook Soulsborne, and honestly probably could have gotten the job done if she'd had the endurance for it. Unfortunately, her patience is about as short as her stamina bar.
What? I think I'm done for the night.
After this breakthrough, she was a little frustrated because it took learning a completely new approach to the fight in order to build stagger. Along with that, I think she was even more jaded that I found a solution because she wanted to be the knowledgeable one with this game. Several of the attacks she'd learned to dodge were now ones she'd need to try and perfect guard. At first she complained it was like starting from square zero, but the reality was the timing wasn't that different. After a couple of attempts, she got the staggers down and managed to finally scrap the Watchman.
Yes! Finally.
With a stable foundation on the combat mechanics, she was ready to start breaking into all the unique systems the game had to offer. Between upgrading and managing her puppet arm to learning to utilize her Fable arts, there was plenty of places to get started. To me, combining weapons is easily the coolest thing about this game. The way it works is each weapon is made up of a blade and a handle. You can mix and match the blades and hilts in any combination you like, with the exception of boss weapons. The handles are what determines the scaling for a weapon as well as its moveset. So, for example, one of her favorite combinations was taking her greatsword blade and attaching it on the end of a curved sword handle so she could quickly swing to her heart's content.
Woo! Man, I hate clowns.
I think one of the strengths of this system is that oftentimes the two of us grow very attached to a weapon's moveset in Souls. But here all you need to do is have your favorite handle picked out and any weapon fits the bill. It meant that she was a lot more open to trying new weapons and combinations without feeling like she had to completely adjust her playstyle. There's a blade for every occasion, whether you need something with long reach or of a certain element. So despite hating daggers, she was able to attach a fire dagger blade to a spear handle and completely change its moveset to take advantage of the status in an area where enemies were weak to fire.
with how hard I'm hitting, there's no way that there isn't like a second phase.
Of course, I'd be completely out of my mind if I didn't bring up the real reason this system is amazing. The absolutely cursed weapon combinations. You can attach your longest blades to even longer handles to create absolute toothpicks of death. Or if you're like my girlfriend, you'll just slap the wrench head onto any handle you can find and run with the one that looks the most ridiculous. Throughout her entire playthrough, nothing made me laugh harder than watching her slap things up close and personal with that tiny crescent wrench. Consumable items are something I hardly ever touch in Souls games. Aside from the odd firebomb thrown here or there, I almost never even equip them to my hotbar. Although my girlfriend has never had an issue throwing everything but the kitchen sink at her enemies. Probably the biggest issue she had in Liza P was there are just so many different items. Half the time she didn't know what she could throw versus what was meant to be an upgrade material. I remember her thinking that the saw blades were meant to be the Titanite shard of this title. Now if she was anything like me, she probably would have been done with them then and there. But instead, she went to the trouble of actually throwing them at an enemy to see what they do. And boy were we in for a surprise.
Okay, get in.
These things absolutely shred whatever you throw them at. The main ones she used were the blades to offset that annoying health regen, and the shot put to land staggers without having to fully charge her heavy attack. She's limited to carrying 3 at a time, but between the blades and the shot put balls, she's an absolute menace with that arm.
Holy shit, that kid's got an arm. There's 2 of us.
I've seen a lot of people criticize the consumable items in this game for being overpowered. Even though she was using them as intended, I have to admit they were pretty insane the way you could shred apart bosses from the safety of throwing distance. Most Souls games are only as hard as you make them for yourself, and if you're using consumables as something you deem too powerful, you may want to pass on them during your first playthrough of Liza P. We both decided it would probably be better for her to limit herself to using the saw blades and shot put balls for their intended purposes and not as a means to deal damage. Granted, grinding souls to purchase more consumables wasn't that appealing to begin with, so the problem sort of solved itself as she ran out of the goodies to throw.
Am I running out of blades? Fuck.
Her biggest takeaway was that the game did a good job of putting fun above difficulty. It was still challenging and had her reeling in frustration in some parts.
No! They were right there! Pinocchio grabbed the wrong ones! Ugh.
But despite that, there were plenty of nice little changes to the Souls formula that made her happy. Even something as simple as leaving her bloodstain outside the boss fog so she didn't have to start every fight scrambling to reclaim her lost souls goes such a long way toward making learning through failure enjoyable. It had her scratching her head wondering why they haven't done that yet in the main Souls series because it seems like such a no-brainer.
Every game's gotta have a swamp level.
Another fun addition is the grindstone.
Talk about elbow grease.
Durability was never much of an issue in the Souls games and really functioned more as an inconvenience than anything else.
What the hell happened there? I missed it. I kept my thing on the grinder.
The same could arguably be said here, but there are plenty of nice applications for grinding your weapon. It can be a little hectic during a boss fight, but I think it's a nice touch.
Shit, no.
In my opinion, the real place it shines is with resins. You can add coatings to the stone that recharge at bonfires and make weapon buffs so much more approachable.
Burn, baby, burn.
Consumable coatings still have their place, as the socketed grindstone buff is limited in use and can only be switched in and out at bonfires. If you want to use multiple elements for different phases of boss fights or multiple types of enemies between bonfires, they have their place. That way you aren't pinned down to a singular element you brought along in your grindstone. Although it can't go unnoticed that the ability to buff up once for free during a boss encounter made her so much more willing to use elemental attacks. Overall, I'd say it was a net positive.
No, I always do that like half the time.
Now, despite the many positive changes mentioned so far, I have to admit, it's not a perfect game, and not everything felt like a home run. They tried a lot of new ideas, which is commendable, but not all of them landed as elegantly as others. The regen mechanic for your Estus flasks stood out in particular for me as the spectator. In theory, it's a cool concept, but it also encourages some bad habits. Notably, you can only work towards regaining a flask when you're down to 0. As I mentioned earlier, this sort of ray of hope mechanic helped my girlfriend to keep pushing forwards when her back was against the wall with no heals. Some of the most suspenseful moments came down to whether or not she could get in close and squeak out enough damage for a cheeky refill on her healing.
Woo. Nice.
The caveat to this system was that it made her incredibly reckless. You can't work towards a refill unless you're down to 0, so like a true Estus addict, she'd burn her last dose prematurely just to feel like her guards and hits were doing something for her.
No, I got out of the way. I was trying to.
She got so used to having 0 Estus that when she had more than one, she'd crank her aggression levels to 11. It may be a uniquely girlfriend issue, but I still think it's worth unpacking. Especially in boss fights, it really stood out how she'd barrel relentlessly at the boss, trading hits until she had no heals left and only then starting to play more disciplined and methodically. I can't say I really blame her because between the boss recovering health and posture, it's hard not to be on the attack at all times. The game encourages an all-out assault playstyle, so maybe that recklessness is intended.
Land! No! Oh! I was so close. I mean, I was being a little greedy, but I was so close.
Despite that notion, I couldn't help but notice that some boss mechanics were antithetical to this style of play. I noticed plenty of times where bosses had attacks that require you to back off to avoid an AoE or risk damage or a status by staying nearby. Additionally, they'll dash away from her and create distance that provides them the time to heal, but made her waste stamina catching back up. Watching her desperately try to chase them down to keep the pressure on made me realize how the combat clashed with the boss design in some places.
I was greedy, but to be fair, when I'm off to the side, the corruption shouldn't fucking hit me.
The moment that stood out the most to me was during one of her earlier fights with a fire boss named Fuoco. At one point during the fight, the machine releases fire and oil that coat the entire arena and inflict the overheat status if you don't hide behind a pillar. My girlfriend wasn't having a problem with the pillars, but would always stand behind them with such frustration that she couldn't keep hitting the boss. The downtime spent waiting behind them was so irritating for her because the boss was getting health back and all its stagger buildup was depleting because she didn't have a way to keep the heat on him. No pun intended.
Damn it.
Probably the biggest head scratcher of a decision for me was the fake staggers that later bosses have. At some point in the game, players will find themselves landing a stagger and approach a boss ready to hit them with a visceral, only for them to say psych and start a combo once you get in close.
What? What the hell just happened?
It's especially bad because the game even has the glowing red indicator on the floor that up until this point you've been taught is where to stand to land a critical. My girlfriend fell for this mechanic more than a few times, and seeing her struggle with it, I just can't help but criticize the decision by the developers to include it in their game.
Okay, that's 100% gonna break. I'll come back for that one. Okay. Yep, I knew it. That's why I waited till I got the Stargazer.
Up until the point that this starts, the game has done its best to teach you how to work for and earn those fatal blows. And executing everything correctly to get the stagger should be rewarded, not punished. Doing it as a one-time gotcha moment on a single boss would have still been lame, but the fact it becomes more and more common with multiple bosses and enemies developed a mistrust in her for the system as a whole.
Nice. Yep, I knew it. Okay. Nice.
Once you know which bosses do it and which don't, it's not hard to deal with at all. But I think the most glaring thing about it is there's really no tell for a first timer to see it coming. To me, the most egregious thing is the glowing indicator on the floor, as the absence of that surely would have raised my own suspicions. I can't say it would have been the same for my girlfriend, but at least the punishment would have felt a little more justified.
Oh, I love those. Except for when bosses fake them out.
That being said, bosses were still plenty of fun to learn, and the spectacle was great for me as a spectator.
This is a hilariously dangerous strategy.
Towards the end of the game, the difficulty of boss fights ramped up quite a bit for her. Parry windows became tighter and tighter, and opportunities to punish became fewer and fewer.
Whew. Jeez.
Not to mention, every single boss starts having a surprise second health bar, which historically hasn't been her favorite thing in these games.
God, I hope this is the last electric boss.
Regardless, no matter how frustrated she'd get, she just couldn't put the controller down. She clawed her way to the top of the tower and finally made it to the big bad of the game, Manus, Father of the Abyss. Or whatever his name is.
I'm gonna call this guy Ergo's Wonders.
The final boss was a little lackluster as he spams plenty of AoE magic that builds the disruption status, which if you're familiar with Curse from the Souls series is an instant death if you manage to get inflicted with it. Between all the different spells flying across the screen and the occasional hands of God reaching down from the heavens to blast the area with an AoE, she employed the ultimate girlfriend strategy, running for her life. To both of our surprise, running away screaming actually ended up working in her favor, although it made for an extremely anticlimactic final boss fight, assuming that was the actual final boss.
Oh my god!
After defeating Ergo's wet nurse, she was convinced Antonio was going to stand up out of her wheelchair and be the true final boss. She didn't quite get that part right, but her sneaking suspicion that she wasn't actually done wasn't that far off either.
Your heart.
What the fuck, Dad?
If you give me your heart,
No.
I believed you were a good boy.
Yeah, you're just being an ass. Oh no. He's asking me for this, like, sacrifice while he's been tricking me this whole time. What? Did he just heal?
Your freedom is not for you.
No, shit. No, get it. Yep. The strings were cut. Uh-oh.
How dare you?
Alright.
You're just a puppet.
Yes! Whew. Oh, okay, we got him. I did a donkeys and Datsu.
And just like that, she's put the lid on Puppet Souls. I was really impressed with how quickly she devoured this game, but honestly, with how often she brings up wanting another Bloodborne, I'm not that surprised. This whole fairytale Dark Souls crossover is something she's wanted for ages.
I would love like a fairytale Dark Souls game. Or it's just light
You
and
want
happy.
like you want high fantasy instead of dark fantasy.
Yeah.
Call it a hunch, but I think she'd play another one someday.
Another key of ours, Dorothy.
Are they doing Wizard of Oz next? Please tell me they are. Oh my god, the ruby slippers! Ah! Oh my god!
We had a ton of fun discovering this game together.
The Tin Man and like the Lion and the Scarecrow? And flying monkeys. And the witches and Glenda, she could be the soul level up girl. Glenda the good fairy.
And since she's done, she's even got pointers for me. Seriously, at the time of editing this, I'm still fighting that damn swamp monster. She may be the Puppet Souls expert of the household, but for whatever reason, I'm not sure if I can trust her.
This is totally what we're gonna tell our kids Pinocchio is someday.